It's just over 3 weeks since the now infamous Let Women Speak rally that took place on the steps of the Victorian Parliament. It was organised by British activist Kelly J. Keane and was attended by women across the political divide, left and right. The substance of the rally was about defending women's rights and women's spaces. Victorian Liberal MP Moira Deeming was one of many to speak at the event. By now we all know what happened. The women's rally ended where 3 different groups converged. The event organisers who were protesting in support of women, a group of trans right activists who argue that defending women is an attack on trans rights, and then of course most controversial of all, a smaller group of black-garbed men who purported to be neo-Nazi supremacists who ended their march with a Nazi salute. What followed was a fair bit of media hysteria and a whole lot of misinformation. The substance of the rally was about defending women's rights to women's spaces and women's language. But almost immediately following the events of that weekend, Victorian Liberal leader John Pizzuto announced he would move to expel Moira Deeming from the Parliamentary Party. Pizzuto's expulsion motion ended in his humiliation. After 10 MPs spoke in Deeming's defence, she took the floor and, after bringing many of her colleagues to tears with her heartfelt remarks, Pizzuto withdrew his motion and Deeming was instead suspended for 9 months, a sentence many of her supporters still regard as unfair. She's a former school teacher, a former Melton councillor before entering the Victorian upper house. Well, Moira Deeming, since arriving in politics, has had what can only be described as a political baptism of fire. Proving she's a genuine team player, Deeming has laid low, as she was asked to, given the Aston by-election. But tonight she reveals her side of the story. Moira, let's go back to the event a couple of weeks ago, the pro-women's rally. The whole focus of the rally in the days that followed was all about the neo-Nazi salute, and there will now be legislation to ban that in Victoria. It's interesting, you have a personal connection to the issue, and that's why I think you said to me that you found the slur against you, this imputation that somehow you were a neo-Nazi type supporter, so offensive. Why was that?
It was just such a shock because it was so obviously untrue.
You had a family history, haven't you?
Yeah, and I could never have expected that. I mean, even if I didn't have that family history, but I do, you know, growing up, you know, while my mother was working, my auntie, who was married to a Holocaust survivor, you know, looked after me all the time. And so I grew up often in the company of an actual Holocaust survivor, and I would speak to my auntie about it. I knew that I would be called a bigot and hateful, and I knew that that wasn't true, but the one thing I was never, ever expecting was to be called a Nazi sympathiser in any way.
I'll get to the consequences you've suffered, Moira, after turning up to the rally and speaking up for women and girls. But I want my viewers to understand, at a personal level, why this issue is so important to you.
Sorry. It's just I've experienced what it's like to be vulnerable. I was abused as a child. I was often targeted in the toilet. I've had men expose themselves to me in public, you know, change rooms and toilets. But the difference was I had the right to do something about it and to complain. And that was the biggest difference that I could see in the law, was that women and girls have no right to complain anymore when their boundaries are invaded like that.
And you're a mum too, aren't you?
I have 3 daughters and I have a son, and it's just so enraging that anyone thinks it's acceptable to put my daughters or me or any woman or any girl at such high risk, where any man can now come into our change rooms and toilets and we aren't allowed to question why they're there.
This is an issue, isn't it, that touches women from all sides of politics?
Yeah. Oh, I'm in the minority. I'm in the minority. It's been really great in terms of breaking down these party-specific tribalistic identity groups, because we're building this movement together based on the fact that we're women, and that all of us, no matter what our political beliefs are, We agree on that reality, and we agree that we need protections on the basis of being women.
Did it hurt you to have this issue play out in the media the way it did, and you not being able to respond? Did it impact you and your family that things were said about you, that you turned on the radio and everyone had a view about Moira Deeming, but you were not able to respond?
Yes, and it just got worse and worse. It seemed to snowball. I just couldn't believe how far and wide it was being spread that I was somehow, in some way, sympathetic to Nazism. And, you know, as I said to you when you asked me for an interview, that I had been asked by the Federals just to lay low until after the by-election, which I did. But it was just horrible watching it snowball out of my control. It was very frustrating hearing all these people talk about, men in particular, telling me whether I should or should not, as an almost 40-year-old woman, go out and speak peacefully about my rights on Parliament steps. That was very frustrating. It was very degrading and demeaning to have people on Q&A, you know, tell me that I should have stayed home, that I should just go home and stay in bed, or that my views on this issue are not important because they're not genuine. That was said. Those two things were said, and especially the one about my views not being genuine, that really hurt.
Your party leader, Liberal opposition leader John Pesutto, was quick, I mean, the Sunday after the rally, to call for your expulsion from the party. But you told the Parliament, John Pesutto and the Parliament a week earlier, that you were going to go to the rally. You in fact invited, I've looked at the speech, you invited the Labor Minister for Women to attend with you. Were you then surprised at the reaction by the Parliamentary Liberal Party to a rally that they knew you were going to a week earlier?
Yes, the whole thing just seemed to come out of nowhere. It was very confusing. Things just progressed so much more quickly than I had expected, and you know, I did my very best to handle the situation as well as I could.
Yeah, I did. I did note, you know, John Pesutto was running the issue through the media, very much ahead of the expulsion motion. When you did speak to your colleagues, and the motion was then withdrawn by the leader, you ended up suspended. Now, I know a lot of people don't think that's fair. What were the grounds for your suspension? Like, well, 3 or 4 things were supposed to happen. What are they? What are those things?
I've been reflecting back on it. So technically there were no grounds listed for the suspension. It just, the other motion that I had brought the party into disrepute and that I was in any way associated with Nazism, that was all withdrawn. And then a new motion was put up that I be suspended. And, you know, I had people who had defended me in the party room say to me, Moira, this doesn't feel fair, but, you know, this is a good outcome, believe it or not. And I said, look, so long as all of the guilt of that particular notice of motion is removed from me, you know, because my main goal the whole time was just to have my name cleared for the sake of my family, for the sake of my husband's career, for my children, for our family name. I just didn't want that anywhere near our name. That was just non-negotiable to me. And so even a 9-month suspension, I was willing to take it so long as that was achieved. And so the 3 conditions were that it's automatic reinstatement after 9 months, you know, the clearing of my name from that notice of motion, and a joint statement. And so that's why I accepted it. And you know, it didn't feel like a victory at the time, but, you know, like I said, my main goal even was just to clear my family name, so I was willing to take that.
So you're out of the Parliamentary Liberal Party now for 9 months, but you're certainly not out of the Liberal Party, are you?
Oh, absolutely not. This is my party, and I'm not going anywhere. And the issues that I'm standing up for are important to the vast majority of our voters, and in fact, so many people across Victoria and Australia and the world, as it seems. And it's actually been amazing to receive such an amazing outpouring of support. I was feeling isolated and very distressed and alone, and I didn't know what to do at first. But as it did sort of roll out into the media, you know, I was horrified at how it got snowballed and how my name was being, you know, dragged through the mud like that. But at the same time, there was this amazing wave of support that was coming through. I was getting almost 1,000 emails a day of support. I know that they were CCing some of the, you know, the other Liberal MPs as well. And look, at the end of the day, this has put a spotlight on this issue. And I think it's really important that people understand how the law has changed and that women and girls are really vulnerable now because, you know, the definition of female doesn't exist clearly anymore. And so we've lost the right to have our female-only change rooms without men in them, our female-only toilets without men in them. We've lost our right to our own sporting teams, you know, to scholarships, everything, even our own words to describe ourselves are gone. And you know, to ask for those back has nothing to do with hate, nothing at all. It's totally reasonable.
Do you think it's possible to be pro-women and avoid these claims that you're somehow a, you know, right-wing radical or anti-trans?
No, because, I mean, this is what people do when they don't have a logical argument, is they revert to calling you names. But that's not going to be putting me off. I've been called names before. I have been, you know, bullied and degraded before, and this isn't going to stop me at all. I've said and done nothing wrong. The worst you could accuse me of is being a bit unwise. That's it. And you know, I'm happy, obviously, to take advice and instructions and whatnot. But at the end of the day, the core issue is whether or not these laws are just. I don't believe that they are fair. I don't believe they're good or safe for women. Women, the vast majority of women don't agree with them when they find out what they actually are. And, you know, this issue is not going to go away. It's not something that can be, you know, swept under the rug. It's only going to grow, and I just don't think women will accept it. I know they won't, and I know that they will push and push until we get those rights back.
You're a new MP, so you know you probably haven't got used to the dark arts of politics yet, but John Pesutto moved this motion against you to expel you from the Liberal Party, ran it out through the media. You know, your name was everywhere for those 2 or so weeks before the issue was resolved. It's hardly, I think, the right way to deal with it. I think many of the things you said were almost defamatory, well, they were defamatory. What's your response to that?
Look, I'm just going to, as always, do my best to deal with any Liberal Party matters internally. That's always been my stance, and that was my stance all the way through this time. It's been more difficult than usual, but, you know, that's just something that I believe, that we need to be trying to deal with these things internally, so that's the way I'm going to continue.
So you're going to decline to say something about John Pesutto?
If I've got something to say to John, I'm happy to speak to him personally.
Why did you get into politics? I mean, it's a rough and tumble world. You've had a baptism of fire. You're a mum of 4 kids. I'm sure you've got enough on your plate. Why take on this challenge?
I couldn't believe that safeguarding around women and children was being removed. I couldn't believe that everything that I had enjoyed in terms of women's rights were now going to be denied to my 3 daughters. And
do you think Victorian, or do you think Australians understand how much has changed under their watch that they perhaps haven't picked up? Do you think they realise it's as bad as it is?
I don't think so. I think they look back on the horrors of what happened to gay people and they think it's the same thing here again, which is fair enough. Those things were terrible, but it's very easy to make room in society for adults, you know, to make their own decisions. The problem with this issue is that there's just a direct conflict between women's rights and trans rights, whether we like it or not. If you destroy or remove the definition of what a woman is to include men, which I only mention trans because it's under the gender identity laws. You know, if gender identity is more important than biological sex, then we lose all of our sex-based rights. And to women and children in particular, that means we're unsafe, it means we're vulnerable. Not to trans people in particular, just men. It's just about something that we all acknowledge as a reality, which is that, you know, in general, women have to be very careful about men. It's not controversial. And good men understand that, they don't worry about it, you know, they're happy to let us have our boundaries. But I just think it emboldens and gives a legal excuse for bad men. Some
of your critics, Moira, want to paint you as a far-right extremist, you know, wanting to tear up Victoria's abortion laws as an example, that this is just only one of the many issues you want to prosecute in the Parliament. What would you say to that?
I would say that they're just superimposing a stereotype on top of me. Again, people who know me know that yes, I am personally pro-life, but I accept that there's a mandate for abortion laws, and that people like me who are pro-life need to focus on just providing care and resources for women who have an unplanned pregnancy, and counselling if that's what they need.
So you don't want to change the laws as they are in Victoria?
I mean, I would love it if nobody wanted to get an abortion. That's what I would love, but that's not the reality, and I do respect the democratic process. There's no mandate for it. I didn't mention it in my maiden speech. The newspapers all started talking about how I had mentioned it. I didn't even say the word. I've never said the word in Parliament.
Are you still a proud Liberal after everything that's happened?
I'm absolutely a proud Liberal, and I think I just want to encourage all of the people who've been supporting me and the people who've been discouraged by what's happened to me, just to please don't abandon the Liberal Party. I want people to stick with the Liberal Party. I don't want to start a new party. I don't want to be an independent. I'm a Liberal and I'm not leaving. This is my party. And if people want to support me and the things that I value, I just want to encourage everyone to, you know, join the Liberal Party. Get involved and help us, you know, to take back this state from Labor.
Moira Deeming, more strength to your arm.
Thank you.